And you've just heard Please Don't Go, which is taken from Upturned Boats EP, also called Upturned Boats, which is out now. And I'm joined by Graeme Black from the band. Hello, Graeme.
Hi, Alistair. Nice to join you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. So before we talk about the EP and the songs on it, tell us about the band Upturned Boats and how the band began. How did you come together?
Okay. Well, I took some time away from music 2015-ish and just didn't really do anything for a few years. And then I guess 2019-ish, 2020 started to pick up the guitar again and got the urge to start writing some music. And it just sort of just started kind of flowing out of me in a way that it hadn't done for a long time. And then, of course, the pandemic hit. I didn't really have anything in mind for this stuff. I just thought, oh, I'm writing songs again. This is strange, but good. And then, pandemic happened and everybody was kind of like just looking for something to, I guess, divert their mind from all of that. And one of my oldest pals, Pete McDonald, who I played with in my previous band, State Broadcasters, obviously he was going through a bit of a tough time as well. And I just started sending them saying, like, I've been writing these things. I don't know if they're any good. And I've always trusted him. And so he was like, no, they're really good, man. And then when we could sort of start meeting up again, we, just for our own sanity, really, we just started meeting up like every Friday or something like that. You know, it was like in the house at my place, and we just started working on these songs again with no real thought about it or anything. It was just literally, it was like something to do. And then we just kept doing that, and over time we were like, you know, this is good fun, we're kind of enjoying this, what do you think? And as sort of we got back to sort of some sort of normality, we started to think about, we could maybe try and put a band together, and then that's what we did. It took us a wee while to do that, and then we ended up where we are now, quite a few years later, obviously. But it just sort of kind of, there was no plan really. It just sort of snowballed like that. Yeah. So
as you say, you and Pete were both in the State Broadcasters. Was it ever going to be a State Broadcasters reunion? Was that ever on the cards, or was it always going to have different musicians this time?
Well, funnily enough, two of the other guys that play with us now were in the Broadcasters as well for a large part of the existence of that band, but that was never the plan at the time. I mean, I always sort of felt like I would work with Pete again, because him and I have a kind of, I don't know, we just seem to really connect musically in terms of sort of understanding where songs should go and things like that. I've always really enjoyed working with Pete. And then, but no, it was never really going to be the Broadcasters again. I had a very, as we started working through it, I had a very clear idea about the sound I wanted to, which is in my view is very different to Broadcasters. Mm-hmm. And it was also, it kind of became quite clear to me that it was more my project, this, in a way. Like it was more my vision, if you like, whereas the State Broadcasters was a very collaborative, a very, very kind of, we worked more as a collective, I guess, is how that band it worked. And whereas this one, I sort of in terms of the direction of the sound and the kind of the overall kind of the way it was going to look and feel was coming from me. So, and all the songs were mine as well, which is another kind of very...
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So they are all, that you've written everything that's on the EP.
Yeah, I think, though, there is a kind of quite a clear difference between what this is, and, you know, you get solo projects which go under a band name.
Yeah.
I really didn't want this to be, because I think there is still quite a nuanced difference between that and what we're doing. I mean, I still really, really love the collaborative sort of experience of creating something with other human beings. So the way it works is I'll write the song and have a very, very clear idea about how I want it to go and how I want it to sound and how I want it to be arranged. But I let the other people in the band write their bits. So sometimes it can mean that the process of putting a song together can take quite a long time because there's a lot of sort of either trying to expand on an idea or trying to narrow an idea down. So whereas I think if it's a solo project, I guess, I don't know, I've never done that, but my understanding of that would be that person probably writes pretty much everything, or certainly has, a very, very, very kind of distinct idea about what should go where. And I still enjoy that element of surprise that you can get from sitting in a room with people, musicians, and them just coming out with something. Okay, I know that I'll have given them a direction towards it, but I'm still always staggered and amazed by what Fergus on the guitar, for example, might come away with and go like, I would never have been able to pull that out. So that I kind of still love bands, I'm kind of like, so I guess I don't know if that's quite old fashioned these days because there doesn't seem to be many bands around, but I still like that. And I think that kind of magical thing that happens between 4 or 5, 3, however many people it is in that room that can make something that no other combination of those human beings would make together is something that I've always sort of just always really enjoyed about making music. And so that's why I would still say it's definitely not like a solo project with a band, So
and does that then feed into playing the songs live then? Because everyone has come up with their own part. It's not like you've, dictated and, that must be when the band really feels like a band, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really played live an awful lot. But yeah, I mean, I think I was one of the things I was very conscious of, like I didn't really want to do was, do that thing where, well, we can play as a 2-piece or we can do it as a 3 or whatever.
Yeah.
Because I wanted the sound to be very much the band sound that people could identify with. But actually, as sort of time has gone on and we found it quite challenging getting shows, we've done a couple of things where it's actually just been me and Pete that have done it. And it's not where I'm happiest with it, but it's still quite nice to get the songs out there, So, so I feel like I guess we've just had to be a bit more kind of pragmatic about that. But yeah, I mean, whenever I think like when we're playing as a band live, I think you do also get. Well, I don't know. I can't really compare it because I've never done that solo project thing, but I would imagine that you get a bit more buy-in from the rest of the musicians because if they're presenting work that they've made, they've created, I would guess that they want to represent that. So yeah, I think so. I mean, we haven't done enough for me to give you a definitive answer on that, really. But yeah, I think.
And I guess the problem is when you do have a band of quite a few people, it is getting everyone together to do. I mean, it looks to me that people in general, they tend not to go on tours of significance because it's just so expensive to do. So is it more like you're looking for the odd date to play, or maybe a week where you play 3 or 4 dates and things like that?
I think it's hard for us because the other element of what we do is that the other guys have got their own projects as well. I mean, like Fergus, who plays guitar with us, he also plays in a band called Hank Tree. I don't know if you know those guys. That's his band.
We've played them. Yeah.
And Pete, who plays with me, plays a lot with Adam Ross and Randolph Sleep as well. So, so they're obviously and what they're doing with me with Upturned Boats is not like me. I don't know if this will necessarily for broadcast this, but it's not like me paying them or anything like that. So they do this because they like it,
Yeah.
Project. Whereas obviously if they're working for someone else or it's their own thing, then they might get paid for it. So it's that can be a challenge as well. But it's just actually I think the landscape of live music's maybe changed a little bit since I was last involved in it, and I think it seems harder for bands. Like if you're looking, what we used to do in my old band that I found quite successful was we would quite often get support slots with, say, like an American band that were touring here. So we were a bit more kind of folky Americana. So an example that I can remember would be like a band like the Handsome Family, who were kind of American sort of old country band, I suppose. They would do a British tour, but they wouldn't have a tour support. So we would sort of approach the promoter and try and get on that bill. And that's we actually got quite a lot of success from that. And but that seems harder now. And I think also even getting supports with local bands now seems to be a bit, well, we've certainly found it a bit more challenging. I think whether it's a logistics things and smaller venues, they just maybe want a solo act to support a band or something like that now. It feels a little bit different. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But it's maybe something to do with the pandemic or something. I don't know. Or that landscape has obviously making money in live music is quite challenging at that level as well. So so it has been quite. That is quite a challenging thing, and I guess as well, I mean, we're obviously older, so it's I don't know whether that plays into it as well, in terms of people's perceptions of who we can sit on a bill with.
It is interesting. I'd never thought of that. Just as I kind of move on to my next question, I'd never thought of that, but you might be right. But it was interesting when you got your email about the band before I'd heard anything, and I saw who was involved. It did, for someone like me, kind of go, well, this is a bit of an indie supergroup from the 2010s, all these people that have played and are continuing to play bands. But I guess you would have all known each other for years.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a very I'm very socially awkward, so I don't really go out very much, and I've never been great at being part of a scene or anything like that. Obviously, we were part of the kind of Olive Grove Records thing for a long time. We were one of the first bands on that, so just by virtue of being part of that, we got to know a lot of bands, and were part of a lot of bills that we were really happy to be part of because I loved a lot of those guys. They were brilliant bands, but I've never been very great at making lots of friends that way. I'm not. The other guys in the band, on the other hand, are much more social. Like, they'll go, do you know such and such guy? He's in this band, and I'm like, nah, I've never. I don't know. But I'd probably, again, I think that's just me. I'd rather, I just stay at home and watch the telly or something, But
you've been involved with Olive Grove at that time, and there was a lot of it was when small indie labels were beginning to really kind of make a mark, and you could almost tell which band was on which small label. I remember going to see a couple of Olive Grove nights when they had different lineups.
Yeah.
It all felt very like not that you were all in a gang together. That's far too stereotypical. But there was kind of links between the music that you played, so I can see how you make connection that way just through playing music.
Yeah, I mean, and that was I mean, I think maybe that's slightly more challenging when you're a bit older and you're not necessarily going out to lots of gigs. I mean, I'm a 50-plus-year-old dad. I mean, I'm not going out to shows at the Hug and Pint on a Tuesday night or anything like that, just on the off chance of seeing someone. But so that's probably one of the other reasons why it's different. But those sort of situations where, like, obviously at the time when we were part of Olive Grove, there was a lot of crossover in the kind of sounds within the bands, and so it made sense for us to be on the same bills together quite a lot of the time. And some bands were significantly more successful than others, but it was always a really sort of supportive and positive environment to be involved in, which I really enjoyed. As not being a sort of natural performer or anything like that, being in an environment that was quite supportive. I really, really liked that as well. And we did loads of fun things, like we played on each other's sets and things like that, which was always good.
Yeah.
Good back as well, it's always good fun to do that.
And in general, now you're releasing music again. You said you took a break from it for a while. Is it notably different? Is it notably different in the way that you have to kind of, because it still was quite common if you're releasing it, it would maybe come out on CD and, viewers would get CDs, whatever. Now, of course, it's mainly streaming, although you can do these things. I think Upturned Boats is coming out on CD, is that right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Which is great, which I still love, and I'm still surrounded by these things.
Yeah.
But
I'll have to send you one.
it has changed, I guess. What's your experience?
Well, in terms of like releasing music, I guess like this is the first thing that I've self-released really, and it's relatively easy to do, but to do it effectively is a different story. And like you could release something tomorrow, and you could say, "Yeah, I've released it. It's on Spotify and it's on Amazon Music and da. It's everywhere." But no one will ever. That's my dog barking. Sorry about that. No one will ever hear it.
Yeah.
Because that's the challenging bit. It's like self-releasing music is the challenging bit is how do you get people to hear it? And obviously there's brilliant support from guys like yourself who still play a lot of like kind of emerging music and local music. And there are still avenues to get into the more mainstream media, but it's not it's not an easy route anymore, and there's not as much of it. I mean, in terms of if you looked at the landscape of music radio in Scotland, it's for new bands, it's virtually non-existent, really.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think so. You have to have. I think you either have to, I guess, have a really good social media sort of profile or understanding of how to make that work, or you have to kind of maybe just get lucky, I think, with somebody picking up something and running with it. But so it's easy to release music. It's not so easy to get people to hear it, I think, is to sum that up. I think it's probably the easiest way to kind of sum that up. I mean, it's interesting, obviously, when I was making music before, like MySpace was kind of like still a thing, and that was quite a nice social network for bands because you could connect with a band from anywhere, and like we did a few shows that way that we got gigs with bands from other places. I mean, there's obviously so many social media channels now, but I don't feel that any of them are quite the same in that there's not. I don't know. I just wish there was one that was just specifically for bands and music.
No, and MySpace almost was that. Although other people used it as well. It seemed to me that's where you kind of went to find a lot of new music, and you very rarely see it on television now, obviously, and on kind of more mainstream radio. And that's such an interesting kind of dichotomy, isn't it? That it's easier to make and release music. So I think more people are making and releasing music.
Yeah.
The problem with that is you're then all struggling to get heard because there's just so much.
Yeah, I think that sums it up perfectly. One of the things I really quite like is that, and I think this is maybe a route that we'll try and go down is, you see these kind of KEXP live sets and things like that, or I guess the Tiny Desk thing on NPR and all these, like, so you get to see a band perform live, but there's obviously there's a lasting element of that that's online forever, really. So it's like I think because I personally, if I hear a new band, like a recorded version of a new band, I still quite like to see what they're like, live. So I quite often really enjoy watching these types of things, and I don't know whether that's maybe something that we'll try and do to kind of present the live version of what we do as well. But I always really enjoy watching those kind of things. I think they're quite a nice sort of there's you obviously you get sort of audience filmed mobile phone,
Yeah.
which I can't bear to ever watch because they just sound terrible. But so that's why I quite like these kind of the way that bands present themselves on these things. And it's to me it's kind of bonkers that seems to be more American public radio stations almost that are doing that, and that our guys are not. But
yeah, I guess I wonder why that is, whether it's lack of facilities to do a live performance in radio stations which are small to say the least. I don't know, but you're absolutely right. A lot of bands, of course, now are kind of doing it for themselves on YouTube. They'll kind of they'll film it quite well one night and then stick it up there on their own channel and you can do there. But again, it's just there's such choice that how are you found?
Yeah. Do you know, I think for me, you can get bogged down with all of that, and it can really suck the life out of you a bit. And obviously, I'm long enough in the tooth now that we're not in it to be superstars or anything like that. The stage in life I'm at and the rest of the guys are at is like we just want to enjoy it. And but I think it's disingenuous to also say that you don't want people to hear it. If you make personally, I make something, and if it's good enough, I want to release it. And the reason I want to release it is because I'm proud of it and I want people to hear it. So I think so that is still really important to me, but I have to sort of keep telling myself that you can't get bogged down too much in that, because otherwise you would just drive yourself bananas, I think.
And I think the advantage that you have, especially with the band that you have, is you're not starting completely from scratch. There will be fans, and I include myself in this, of state broadcasters and the other bands you've mentioned who are looking forward to listening to new music. So, that is something I think is definitely a positive.
Yeah, I hope so.
So to go back to the actual songs on the EP, we've spoken a couple of times how this is the first music you've made for a while, and it seems to me that the themes are, if you'll excuse the word, more adult themes. They're certainly about people that have moved on in life, whether it be becoming a father or friendships or all those things. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I think that's one thing that's changed in the way that I write songs now, is that what I've always tried to do is write from an honest sort of perspective and quite a personal perspective, but try to make it sort of feel universal, so that hopefully the listener can connect with it in some sort of emotional way as well. So, but I think I think what I'm doing now is I'm probably a bit better at that, and I think that is just because you're probably at my age slightly less self-obsessed and and a bit more it's easier to express how you feel in a more universal way. I kind of my benchmark for songwriting is Jeff Tweedy from the band Wilco, and his kind of warmth and humanity in his music, and just generally the way that he presents himself is the kind of my benchmark for how I try and conduct my life, really, which is that's what I try to do, and yeah, of course, as you get older, you've experienced more and more different things. It would be a bit I think it'd be a bit sad of me to be kind of still sort of writing in the same vein that I was when I was 20 or 21, sort of falling in and out of love and all that. That's just not my life anymore. But you have a lot of other experiences that you can build songs on, and that's what I've tried to do. And I think the key is the music, the songs I like are ones that I might not necessarily completely understand what that writer is going through, but somehow it can connect with me, and that's how I hope that people listening to my songs, I hope they can get the same from it. That's what I've tried to do anyway.
And you mentioned you took that kind of break See that as having helped your songwriting latterly? That it was good to kind of say, right, was it enforced or was it just the guitar stays in the corner and I've left that for a while?
What happened with me was that in the last few years of playing in my old band, I started to experience extreme anxiety about playing music live, and it got to the stage where I was either going to have to stop it or I was going to just end up hating everybody and everything about it. And so that's why I stopped doing it, because I didn't want to hate people who are the nicest people that I've got in my life. So so that in a way it was enforced, and didn't necessarily mean I had to stop writing songs, but sort of by virtue of just stepping away from it entirely, that's kind of what happened. And then I actually completely just took time away and I went and learned how to play the clawhammer banjo just to learn something new from scratch. And actually, there was a few early Upturned Boats songs that have got banjo on them, but we've never really, we've kind of moved away from that a bit. And but then I just started playing the guitar again, and that's when the songs just started to come. And it's like I've never been as prolific as I am now. Like it's sort of seems counterintuitive to the conventional narrative of rock and roll music or whatever. Like, but I feel like I write more now than I ever did.
And so was it difficult to get that number of songs on the EP? Could it have been, gatefold triple album or something like that?
Yeah, it's the most difficult thing about it is actually getting the rest of the guys to, put their parts together to, because obviously they are creative in their own, as we spoke about earlier, their own bands. So it's finding the time for us to actually make the songs together. Because I mean, those songs to me that are on the EP, which are just coming out, I know this is a well-worn trope of songwriters, but they're really old to me. Like, and even the songs that we are now playing are quite, because I've sort of been writing constantly. So the challenge is just more getting everyone else up to catch up with me. So yeah, we haven't got anything else recorded. So from that point of view, no, it couldn't have been a gatefold triple album. But like in terms of the songs that are written, it could easily have been. But I would never do that because I'm old school like that way as well. Like I like, even when you could make an 80-minute album on CD, like I always want the albums to be less than 45 minutes.
Absolutely agree with you. There was a period where nearly everyone was using up every minute they could on CD.
Yeah.
And it was an awful idea, because really, after 45 minutes, after two sides of vinyl, if you like, it's starting to get a push. And the quality of really good albums really went down in the last 15 minutes.
I feel like it did. I feel like I don't know whether it's just the era you were brought up in. I mean, that was just what you had, and that's what it was. But I personally I like. I feel like when you get to an album that's longer than that, it can lose its cohesiveness. Like I feel like I'm not necessarily saying that there has to be a concept as such, but I feel like there has to be a narrative arc running through an album for it to really work properly. And I think if you go much longer than sort of the conventional, I mean, some of my favorite albums are like half an hour, and that's just like, I suppose it just means you can listen to it twice in the time that you would listen to something else. But yeah, the songs on the EP, I think the Car Park Sadness and Please Don't Go, which were the first two singles. They are kind of newer ones, and I feel like they are closer to how we sound as a band now. Because I think it takes, even though we knew each other a long time, it takes a band a little bit of time to find their sound. And I think kind of like, so now if, we can actually put a song together a bit more quickly because we understand what the sound is. And the other four songs on it are a bit earlier songs, and we were still maybe trying to figure out. But I still love those songs. Don't get me wrong. I don't think I'd be interested to see if if you get a chance to hear them live, they do feel a bit different, those songs now, as to those recorded versions.
Yeah, that'd be interesting and definitely something to look out for.
Yeah.
Graeme, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I love the EP, so we're going to hear another track in a moment. But before that, thanks very much.
Oh, thank you.
And this is Upturned Boats and Flightless Birds.